thank you so much for joining Jules and Sarah, our wonderful board members.
I mean, we're a really diverse group. We're kind of all ages, genders, backgrounds.
We come together collectively and we discuss things, and then from that it's just very organic. You come up with ideas and ways that we can scale and start developing.
Knowing you're making a difference, and yeah, putting your skill set to good use. We don't always get the opportunity to do that in our everyday roles.
I love working with Indigo.
Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining Jules and Sarah, our wonderful board members. And we thought this would just be a really great opportunity to share with people, what does a board do, who's on our board, what do board members usually do, and what's their function within a charity. So thank you so much for joining and being willing to answer all these questions this morning. I'm Holly, and I'm the founder and CEO of Indigo Volunteers, and this is Jules and Sarah, our wonderful board members on our charity. So I wanted to open up to you both by asking, what is a board? What do they do?
I'll pass that on to the chair, I think.
Do jump in. So I would say a board is a collection of very different individuals, but our overarching role is to ensure the accountability of the charity, to keep the charity on track with their strategy, to help with the strategy. And we're generally there as kind of like the stopgap to make sure that nothing bad happens.
Yeah, I think.
Jules?
I know, I was going to say, I think that lots of people think boards are quite scary, and often people that are a lot older and more senior and things. What's your experience of that, Jules, on our board, and also your experience of what the board does as well?
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, we're a really diverse group. We're kind of all ages, genders, backgrounds. So I think actually that's kind of a really comforting way to join a board. You're coming from different backgrounds, and you know that you're coming with a kind of skill set that's hopefully going to be useful and valuable. But yes, I think we're a pretty energetic board. I've seen other boards in action. I think comparatively we're fairly sort of energetic. We get stuck in, and yeah, I definitely wouldn't have any reservations if you're sort of, you know, not what's the polite way to put it, sort of, you know, in your older years of experience. I definitely wouldn't have any reservations about joining a board like Indigo's.
Yeah, and I just want to add on to that. I think what's really great about our board, and I don't know how other boards work in practice, but it's more like it's a group of people who are very interested, who don't necessarily work in this area, but are interested in how Indigo works and the impact it's having. And it's more like we come together collectively and we discuss things, and then from that it's just very organic. You come up with ideas and ways that we can scale and start developing, which is really exciting. It's a nice way to work.
And just on that point, would you say that people that are interested in joining boards generally, whether it's Indigo's or any other charity, they have to have specific experience within the sector that the charity is operating in?
No, I don't think so. I think that we've definitely come from a range of different backgrounds. And
yeah, if we go through all of our backgrounds, we have mining, civil service, third sector,
legal, a lawyer,
like entrepreneur. So I think actually it's much better to have a diverse range, because it brings those different perspectives, those different experiences, and I think it can only add more value.
Yeah, but you and Dean have both been volunteering with refugees, both through Indigo, I think, as well, right? So that's actually really helpful when we're speaking about partners and things. Like, it's also really useful for you to bring your perspective and experience from those times as well. So it's nice to have a mix. Like, some people don't have and some people can.
I think it's good to have like an interest, obviously, in refugees, but depending on how active that is, that I don't think that necessarily matters.
And what are your specific roles on the board?
Well, I'm the chair. So I did just start as an advisor, but I've moved into chair role. And that largely is working a lot with Holly, with yourself. I would say more just kind of as your sounding board, but I also help to drive the direction of the strategy to make sure we're kind of on track. But also importantly to make sure that we're remaining accountable. So like, how are we measuring our impact? Where do we see ourselves in 5 years' time? How are we going to get there? But also helping oversee kind of like more operational stuff as well. So that might be, so I'm quite actively involved in the marketing and fundraising subgroup, and we meet monthly to do with that. And that's really exciting because I get to also work with the operations team. So it's really nice to really kind of broaden who I'm involved with in the charity. And then from a board perspective, we have our quarterly board meetings, which are usually about 3 hours long, which is nice. Jules?
And yeah, and I'm an advisor on the board, so getting kind of stuck in on a range of different issues in different areas. So yeah, also strategic direction. Been kind of very involved in the marketing and the communications, the diversity and inclusion. That's been a really kind of interesting area to get involved with. And as Sarah said, you know, working closely with the operational team on those issues. So it's a way of also, because as a board you're not on, you know, you're not involved typically day to day. So it's, you know, getting involved in specific areas or themes means that you have that interaction with the team. You get that sort of opportunity really to learn a bit more about the charity, about Indigo, and of course, yeah, get more involved in things that are important to Indigo. So yeah, it's a really diverse role, and there's, you know, when Indigo got involved in the Ukraine in the earliest days, many of our board members also got quite involved in sort of helping guide direction and yeah, next steps for what we wanted to do in the Ukraine. I think that opportunity to always get involved in things that we're interested in but also could add value to is great.
Yeah, and that was actually a really kind of exciting time to be working at Indigo. It was very much like everyone coming together, coming up with ideas and really like driving it through, and it completely changed the direction that we were working for a little while. So that's a really good time to be involved. I think also what I find is really good is you can, because of the nature and the size of Indigo and the fact that we're in a position where we're quite small, but we are setting the groundwork to really start to grow and scale. If you have an interest in a particular area, you can just get stuck in. Or if you perhaps want to, from a professional point of view, if you want to develop in an area that perhaps you're not able to do in your own career, you can do that here. And so it's really good, and everything's very receptive.
Yeah, and I know that I find the board incredibly valuable because it's funny, even last week we're trying to re-implement one-to-ones and professional development plans again, because we've got a bit sidetracked and we really need to focus on them again, and development of our team. And I was like preaching the importance of them, and then I was like, oh gosh, there's no one doing mine. Like, and that so often happens when you're running something, or you're a CEO or a director or something, and you can often miss yourself out. And without a board, like so I just turned to a board member, and Steen, and he very kindly agreed to be doing my one-to-ones and professional development plans. But if I didn't have the board there, or they weren't that interested or involved or active, I then would really be missing out on these types of things. And it's so wonderful to be able to literally soundboard off you guys and get support in areas where we have gaps and we're missing that knowledge and those skills. And so often I'm of course coming to you like with particularly around marketing or fundraising strategies, or the overarching strategy of the charity, just to ask your input. And Sarah, we catch up every fortnight, and yeah, I just find it so incredibly helpful, and to get feedback as well, because otherwise who's feeding back to me about how the charity's doing, how I'm doing, and so on. So it's such an incredibly valuable role. On that note, what's your experience of how involved you guys are operationally, And is that normal for every board, would you say?
I think it fluctuates depending on what's going on. Definitely has been, I think my experience with Indigo over the last period of time, I think it's now a year and a half, 18 months I've been with Indigo. So there have been periods of kind of more intensity, for example, Ukraine, where, you know, we've really wanted to get more operationally engaged, and we've done that, and that's taken more time, but, you know, time that we've wanted to give, or I've wanted to give. And then there are other times where, you know, business as normal doesn't need board involvement as much, and you can you get the updates as needed. And I think every board member at different times is involved in different ways, so it really does depend on what everyone's got going on as well. We work, or we've got other things going on, so yeah, it definitely fluctuates. And I think that that's the beauty of it. When one of us can't be as involved operationally, somebody else can, and so we definitely tag team a lot as well.
Yeah, and I think key is definitely, you know, we're all here because we want to help out, but we are also all volunteers, and I think everyone's very respectful of that. So I think it's very much, it does fluctuate, and that's really important to say, but it's very much based on how your capacity and what you're able to give and when. So it's just about being transparent about that, what you want to get involved with when you're perhaps a little bit busy outside of Indigo, and then when you can step back in as well. And I think it works quite well, Holly.
Fantastic, it's so flexible, amazing. In my experience with other charities as well, it's every board operates differently and specific to that charity. So some charities boards are a bit more hands-off, or they're just more advisory, and some are a bit more operational, like you guys are a lot more operational. So I think as long as people's expectations are managed from both sides, and it's communicated really clearly what your expectation is of a board, and the board's expectation of the senior leadership team and their communication, then you're okay, because yeah, it's clear. You mentioned earlier, Sarah, that every quarter we have a 3-hour or 3.5-hour board meeting, which sounds absolutely dull, and somehow I walk away from them buzzing with energy. Yeah, 3-hour meetings generally are a really bad idea, but the board meetings, from my perspective, are not like that. What would you say, people that are thinking, I don't know if I've got the time or the right skills, just, you obviously mentioned it briefly earlier, but just to sum it up in this bit, in yeah, commitment and skills, what's required?
I think at the minimum it is just going to that board meeting. So it is only 3 hours every 3 months. And we do work together to make sure we find a time that suits everyone. And perhaps it's not 3 hours in one go, it might be 2 like 1.5-hour sessions. So we are very flexible. Sometimes we don't need the whole 3 hours, but generally it does zoom by, because we want to know about everything going on. And there's always a lot of like healthy discussion, which is always very exciting. But yeah, and your question about skills, I mean, I think it's great that everyone brings different skills. We don't necessarily want people with like, we want everyone to be different, but like for the moment, like say for example, at the moment we want a new treasurer, so there we want skills that people who are like really experienced in accounting or perhaps working finance. So everyone brings their little niche area, but then very much it's all about getting stuck in and actually expanding your own skills. It's, you know, it's an opportunity for you as a board member as well, for sure.
Absolutely. And we are recruiting at the moment for a treasurer. So Sarah was going there, I could tell in her answer. But yeah, we are looking for a new board member and a treasurer. So I think that skill set is obviously one that we do need at the moment. And that is, yeah, that, as Sarah said before, it's a really good opportunity for somebody who is working perhaps in that space or has that sort of skill set in their role, but is looking to grow it. This is a really good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and just to kind of start wrapping up, what would you say people get out of being on the board, if anything?
I think lots, honestly. Like I always feel really excited actually after kind of, you know, meeting as a board, but also with the team about, the work that Indigo does, which is really, really important work in the refugee space. It's a critical charity. It's an organisation that I've been following for a while before I got more involved, and I think that sort of that knowing that you're part of something that is growing in importance in and making a difference in a really sort of in a space sort of close to all of our hearts, which is supporting refugees along the European refugee route, and specifically matching volunteers with grassroots organisations that so desperately need that support. So I think, fulfillment, knowing you're making a difference, and putting your skill set to good use. We don't always get the opportunity to do that in our everyday roles. We develop these skill sets, and then sometimes we want to challenge ourselves to use them differently. And I think this really is a good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I just add to that, like, I've been on the side where I've been a volunteer in the field, so I know how important grassroots are, and I know how they plug all of these gaps that governments and the bigger charities just aren't able to fill at that pace. So for me, it's more about I love working with Indigo, and the reason for that is because I think in your day-to-day job, there's always, like, you can like your job, but there's always things that you get frustrated by, or like gets you down, and it's usually like the bureaucracy, the red tape. But actually at Indigo, like, you are directly impacting that front line, and it's so exciting and so nice to be able to personally be able to help do that. So like using my own skills and my specific skills to help influence that. And I think the joy of working with Indigo is that because we're such a small charity, you can see the impact, and we can measure that, and we can really, like, if we put this in place, like, then we see it happening, and that's often you don't get that fulfillment in your day-to-day job.
Yeah, it's quite quick from idea to things actually happening and changing, and I think it's also important that so many people who I meet and speak to feel a little bit, I don't know, lost or hopeless, and want to input in something meaningful. And it's important to know that you don't have to quit your job and go and volunteer on the front line for 6 months to do that. You can actually take different roles within charities, and you can do remote volunteering. You can join a board, for example, and bring your skill set to those types of roles. So I think that's really nice that you can bring you can put your time and energy into something while still being at home and having an impact in a chat with a charity. So that's what I really love about the board roles, and also just, as I say, find it so incredibly valuable, and we wouldn't function half as well without the board we've got. So thank you both for being on the board, and thank you both so much for joining and answering these questions. I think people that really are not so sure about what boards do and how they function would have been really informative. So thank you both so much, and have a lovely rest of your day, and thanks everyone for watching.